in that case, like the mom was kind of skeptical because we were like two, kids,
right.
I mean, pretty much, who had just like come up with these designs and brought them over from India. But her daughter was really excited about it. And her daughter tried on this palazzo set, and she was just like Mom, this is what I want. Like, I don't want anything that's like too pink and too this and like too much. And the mom told us afterwards, she was like, I've never seen her excited about wearing like Indian clothes.
Hey everyone, I'm Arjun, and welcome to the first episode of My First Sale, the podcast where I take you under the hood to see what all you need to do to start your own e-commerce business. We're going to hear from people who are right in the thick of it, and I'm honored to welcome my first guest to the show, Niki Shamdasani. Thanks so much for being on the first episode of this podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I guess really the goal that I wanted to do with this was to talk through with small business owners about those kind of struggles that they faced, both professionally and personally maybe, and kind of hear about what their journey has been so far, because I think that usually for people who are starting out, it can be most useful to hear from somebody who's like just a few steps ahead of them, try to figure out what kinds of struggles they need to go through if they want to start their own thing as well. I think there's, hundreds, thousands of people out there who really want to take that step, but don't know what they need to do to get there. So I think you're the perfect person to tell us how.
Thank you. Well, let's hope so.
So yeah, I guess maybe just start by mentioning a bit about what your company does.
Cool. So my name's Niki Shamdasani. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sani, which is a South Asian-inspired fashion brand. So it was co-founded with my younger sister, who's a first year at NC State right now. And we started about 2 years ago now, a little over 2 years ago. And it was really born out of a personal need where we weren't finding fashion that we were excited about, South Asian fashion, and fashion that represented more than one part of our identity. And so it started off as a side project, as like, let's make some outfits for ourselves and our friends. Because when we had started talking to our friends, we were like, is anyone else finding things that they really like? Or are we just like missing out on something? And we, like, the resounding answer was no. We weren't missing some store or website or whatever. It was something other people also felt like that they weren't finding the kind of fashion that excited them within our culture.
Yeah.
And so we made these outfits for ourselves and our friends, and from there it kind of just took on a life of its own, from a side project into something else. And so I was, when we started the side project, I was living in New York, had just left my job in venture capital, and was now starting to do some sort of internships and projects with AR and VR companies. And that kind of gave me the headspace and the capacity to also be doing this side project of Sani. And at a certain point, I was like, wait, I don't want to be doing anything in AR or VR. I want to be doing this thing. We were seeing this excitement and this need. And so we went for it. And now here we are today with a business.
Very cool. Yeah, I think, they often say that like the best kinds of companies that one can create is one where you would actually use the product yourself. And it sounds like when you guys were coming up with this and feeling that need of not having like pieces that you wanted to wear, it really drove you to try to solve that.
Exactly.
And I'm actually curious. I think the way you said it just now sounds very casual, but to me, like the idea of creating like this piece of, this is like nice fabric. Like it is like a very, it's like what you would wear for a special occasion. How do you even say, I know how to make that.
Yeah, no, you're right. In, you know, retrospect, you can be like, so we just started making clothes. But
Yeah, exactly.
like, neither of us had any fashion background. Now my sister's studying fashion, so that's good. That's helpful. But otherwise, no idea how to make clothes or design or anything like that. So you're right. I say it like it's, I mean, it was a stretch to figure it out. And really, it was one step at a time. It was like, what are the kinds of things we want? Oh, we want less blingy fabrics. We want these more subdued colors. Like, we started talking through these things, and the next step was, you know, where do you find these sorts of fabrics? And we kept looking for brands, right, that currently had these sorts of things. And the next step was, my mom happened to be going to India to see my grandmother, and she was like, why don't you come with me and we can go look for some fabrics and get some things again made for you. Because, you know, in India, there are lots of tailors out there, and a lot of people get clothes made just for themselves, really, really small quantities. And that's more of a thing you can do there. And so she was like, well, we'll find someone, and, you know, you can make these things for you and your sisters. And so my sister and I beforehand came up with this, now what we call a portfolio, but really just like cobbled together of like, we want this sort of blouse with this sort of skirt. And so it was really that one step at a time. And when we went to India, we actually found a few tailors through friends of friends, and just you start telling everyone you know what you're doing, right? And it turns out that like somehow you can have a connection to pretty much anything if you just like tell the whole world, this is what I want to do. And so that's exactly what happened. And we also like Googled a few, and we went to like 5 different some were like just home shops, some were real sort of professionals that had stores and everything, and we kind of gave each of them some pieces that we wanted them to make after going to fabric stores and just picking out beautiful fabrics. Wow. And everyone except one actually worked out. Like the quality was terrible. You know, you don't even, I think what we've learned over and over again, right, is you don't know what you don't know.
Of course.
And so we didn't think that we had to specify that, you know, there needs to be lining underneath the fabric if the fabric's itchy from the inside, right? And so there are 100 million things that we hadn't even told these people, and it was kind of like, you figure it out, and then we'll see what quality you naturally produce and go from there. So one person worked out, and when it came time to keep making, when we decided to do that, we continued working with that person, and they're the ones that really got us off the ground. But their quality from the beginning was amazing. Wow. And they're the ones who taught us, like, here are the things you look for. Next time you need to specify, I like this lining, I like this, I like that. And they've been amazing teachers throughout, and I think we got very, very lucky finding them through friends of friends.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you guys also tried very hard to make that effort to find people. So, you know, wouldn't discount your effort at all here.
Sure. But I'd also say, like, our parents were so supportive also, right? Like, I don't know people in India, really. I mean, I have cousins there and stuff, enough. But I also don't talk to them often. And so a lot of it was, like, my mom reaching out to her cousins over there from when she was growing up and saying things, and asking around. And so I can't discount how supportive they were at the beginning. And without that, like, I wouldn't have known where to start, and we wouldn't have had the right support to be able to take even the first step. Yeah,
absolutely. So when they were making these pieces and you were sort of noticing that there were, you know, some issues with some of them, as you mentioned, sounds like almost most of them. Were you just trying them on yourselves? Like, how are you noticing?
Even now, we try on everything that we get. Wow. Because you can't know that something is off until you try it on. I mean, now we have quality control checks that we have the factory do, you know, before anything is sent over. But still, you can't know until you try it on. And the people making these outfits for us aren't going to be trying it all on. Right. So, but from the beginning, it was like, these are our outfits, right? And that's when we notice, like, you need lining on the inside of the blouse on the side, or it's going to, like, really itch over there. It's going to bite into you. It's better where possible to have hooks on the back instead of just zippers, because that makes it easier to pull things on and off, and all of these things. And so, yes, it was by, like, trying it on, and then also, like, researching a lot. Like, the places where we saw the sorts of outfits we wanted were the top Indian designers, right? And they're the ones selling things for thousands of dollars. They are doing amazing work that I wish the whole world would see to understand, like, how incredible South Asian fashion is. It's not affordable for most people, right? But we were taking cues from them also, like, seeing what's their lining like, you know? And that's the sort of research we had to do, in addition to just wearing the clothes and seeing what felt good to us and what tweaks we would want to make to feel more comfortable and excited about the clothing.
Right. That makes sense. Do you feel like, I guess, so you and your sister started this company, right?
Yes.
Do you feel like growing up you had sort of like a heightened sense of awareness about the clothes that you were wearing, and not just how they looked, but how they felt and how, like, the materials they were made of and stuff like that? Or is this something that only once you started to see that need that suddenly all these light bulbs turned on?
It was really when we started to see the need, because when we were younger, and I think this is probably true of most people, right? Our mom would get the clothes for us, right? So we weren't really shopping for it. I mean, when we'd take trips to India, of course you buy when you're there as well. And I knew we knew we hated the process. And that was from uncles telling us that, like, oh, this is what's going to look good on you, to, just spending hours and hours, like, in all of these stores trying to find a needle in the haystack and everything in between, really. Like, we knew we didn't like the shopping process, but it wasn't until we were older, like, so in recent years, right before Sani, that we started paying more attention to it. And I think that was because we had developed more of a sense of, like, what we wanted to wear and everything like that we just didn't have when we were younger. That was part of it. And we were also becoming more aware of, again, at the very top, what fashion could look like and feel like within, South Asian fashion.
That makes sense.
So it was a heightened awareness over time. We just knew we hated it before, right?
Fair enough. And actually, the point that you bring up about how when you were younger, you used to basically, like, and this is really common, I think, within the South Asian communities, like, many times you'll go to India, you'll buy a bunch of stuff, and you'll bring it back. And I think this is a huge issue for the Indian American population, because going to India is expensive. It takes a lot of time. You don't do it that often. I mean, maybe some people go once a year, maybe twice a year if you're really sort of committed to that. But, getting those pieces is a pain. So how do you guys get the pieces here? So all of the fabrics right now are purchased there. All of it is manufactured over there. And then we get, the finished pieces shipped over here, but it's all designed by us. Okay.
And I think the point you're making is really, really important, because there are very different mindsets in the US, I'd say, versus India about even the costs of South Asian fashion and how they've changed over time. I think in India, when we go to see the new designers in Shapur Jat, and we, are trying to understand where the market is over there, we see that, like, people, first of all, are spending more on clothes, and if you have the money, right? Like, people are spending more on South Asian fashion over there than over here for comparable, like, events. So a wedding or something like that.
Sure.
And I think that's natural, right? Over there, maybe there's also more times during the year you can use it, like, whatever it may be. I think that is natural, but that there are mentalities around even the price point and how it's become more expensive to make this clothing over time, that people kind of see over there, or can see more readily because it's just available everywhere, that I don't think has transferred over here quite as yet. In the past 5 years, 10, I mean, I'd really say the past, like, 10 years, but 5 years especially, it has become a lot more expensive to even manufacture the clothing.
Wow.
And the fabrics have gotten more expensive. Everything's gotten more expensive. So I think like when people are also thinking about these purchases, you got to think about your trip to India. You have to think about the time you're spending, but you also have to think about the fact that like actually it's pretty expensive over there as well.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And out of curiosity, are there certain larger trends that you're seeing cause those increase in expenses, or is it mostly just around the demand for those products?
I think that there are a lot of things, including the fact that like especially for what we are making, it requires a lot of skilled labor, right? It's not being done by machines. It's being done by people, by hand. And so I think one, people are paying for that skilled labor in a more fair way. And actually the factories we use, we vet them to make sure that they are paying their workers fair wages. So we probably could get lower prices, but we want people who are paying their laborers in a ethical way.
Right.
So I think there's that people are being paid more. I think demand is skyrocketing. I also think that as the fashion becomes more visible, it's also becoming more expensive as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think something that is sort of central to almost every entrepreneur's journey is the moment where you actually make your first sale.
Yeah.
And this is something that I've actually heard Shopify CEO Toby Lutke talk about a lot. It's something that I guess kind of drives their business, is thinking about how to help entrepreneurs get their first sale. And I remember, our first sale, and it was something where it really changed the trajectory and mindset that you have surrounding your company. So I'm curious if you remember what yours was and any thoughts around that.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I don't think anyone forgets their first sale, right? It was someone we knew, and it was an in-person sale. The first couple of weeks of the business, when we had put pictures up on Instagram, we were just waiting for the sales to start pouring in. We were ready. And then when nothing was happening, we were like, what's up? We've interviewed so many people. We've shown them the clothes. It seems like there's excitement. So why aren't people buying? And very quickly we realized that people needed to feel the clothing. They needed to be able to try it on, especially in the beginning, right? As the brand was starting to be it wasn't a thing, right? And so how could they trust what they were getting from a picture? And so we started just taking private appointments with people at our parents' house in Fayetteville. And we didn't even announce it in a really big way. We were just it was just word of mouth as we knew weddings were happening. Oh, you want to come over and just check out some clothes? And so it came out of one of the first appointments that we did that in the first month. And so it was really amazing because I know in that case, the mom was kind of skeptical because we were two, kids, pretty much, who had just come up with these designs and brought them over from India. But her daughter was really excited about it. And her daughter tried on this palazzo set, and she was just Mom, this is what I want. I don't want anything that's too pink and too this and too much. And the mom told us afterwards, she was I've never seen her excited about wearing Indian clothes. And that was the first sale. Yeah. And that moment was exactly why we had started, why it had become from a side project to let's see if we can make this something more. It's because we were seeing South Asian women like ourselves who just weren't excited about what they were wearing. And so it also made us realize that we hadn't thought properly about how we'd need to market and make more sales, right? These well, in this case, it was a young woman who was our user, but our customer was her mom. Right. And we were oh, so we kind of have to make sure that we're speaking to both these people. And so we started thinking more about that from there. But that first sale was great, but it was also like, oh no, we didn't think about this at all.
That's amazing. Yeah. And actually, the point that you brought up at the end is something I'm curious about. In general, I mean, I know you're targeting South Asian women generally, right? And I don't know, is there an age range that you typically try to target?
I'd say the age range that buys from us the most, and so the one that we've been targeting is from like 18 to low 30s.
Okay.
So usually like first generation.
Sure. Okay.
South Asian Americans.
That makes sense. And I guess the interesting thing about that is probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would guess that the lower third maybe of that age group are still largely dependent on their parents' salaries, and maybe the upper half, upper 2/3 is not. So how are you figuring out who to target there? Like, I mean, sometimes, like you said, the user is always the person who's wearing it, but the person who's actually making the purchasing decision can vary pretty widely there.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is, even what we've seen is, even as like South Asian women start their like professional lives and everything like that, they still rely on their moms when they're making this kind of purchasing decision. So like maybe for a gala or something like that, they'll take care of it on their own. But when it comes to their like cultural clothing, they're still like, Mom, I want to make sure you think this is a good purchase. So they depend on, you know, their parents even as they kind of get older. And I think that makes sense because I think a lot of our parents have experienced like maybe growing up in India or something, and like making their clothes and picking fabrics and knowing what's good quality, especially that point. And so I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, I don't think we've still done a good job of targeting our customers, right? I think initially it was as simple as we'll be on Instagram and Facebook, right? And I think that's overly simplistic. Then we started to vary the kind of copy and the images that we were using on Instagram and Facebook here and there, and what posts we were sponsoring. We still haven't gotten to it for sure. It's just, and one thing that I think we lost sight of, especially in the past like 6 to 8 months, is continuing to like obsessively interview like our customers and our users. And that was initially what got us onto like, okay, we should also be on Facebook. That's what got us to, let's try this sort of copy. It was by talking to people. Right. And then I think we've been too much in the weeds recently, just trying to figure it out and ourselves, and that we need to get back to talking to people so we understand what are the other things that we should do better. But it was also like we were doing a lot more shows earlier. And so when the mom and daughter, let's say, were coming to us, we'd be like gauging their reactions and seeing what landed and everything. And again, in the past 6 to 8 months, we were like, we want to double down on what we're doing kind of online. And we had this sort of big partnership come up. And I think that came at the expense of us continuing to do these in-person things, whether interviews or shows or anything in between. So the long answer to your question is we're still figuring it out, like how to effectively target these people, but there have been like little tweaks over time that we've tried to make. Totally
makes sense. And yeah, I think it's interesting, especially for fashion brands. I mean, this is obviously the case with any startup, is sort of trying to, you know, build your brand online, build your credibility, but especially for consumer products and especially for, you know, fashion, I think platforms like Instagram, like Facebook become hugely important. I mean, how do you think about that? I know you guys actually have the Instagram handle @Sani, which I can't even imagine how you got that. But
thank you. We worked so hard. So the fact that you brought that up means a lot, because I mean, it was a wonderful friend who kind of had an in and was able to you know, help us out. But it was a pretty much inactive account. So we'd been trying to get it. I'd been messaging @Sani for a year and a half, including like I sent such stupid messages, like on my birthday. I was like, Sani, I'd really appreciate this handle. Like, it's my birthday. Like, I had gotten so desperate. I was just like messaging him. It seemed like he was this like random guy. I'd been messaging him like every couple of weeks just asking. And I knew it was inactive. I knew nothing was happening, but I said, maybe he'll see my birthday message. Maybe he'll see this. But finally, it came through. But one thing that we've really learned is to like be more transparent. And that's something that we want to do more of. We've always been interested in how to bring people into the industry, because we knew at the beginning a lot of these women are relying on their moms, or not. Maybe it's just a very like amorphous kind of industry. Like how do you know what to get? How do you know if this is good quality? And so we wanted to kind of highlight these things that we didn't know when we were starting. Like, how do you know if something's hand embroidered versus machine embroidered? What are the things that you should look out for when shopping for a piece? We did this like mini series recently on our quality control checks that people could use when they were shopping as well. Like, look for this in the lining and that. And it's these sorts of things that we're trying to do a better job of on Instagram and Facebook that we see is resonating with people. And I think that we should be doing a lot more of, because we've obviously like come into this industry as newbies and have learned a lot over time, definitely. But I think that like bringing people kind of on that journey with us as we learn more and more has been something that we've noticed seems to resonate. And obviously, like, that's what everyone says, right? Be authentic and all of these things. And so I get it. But, you know, it's always scary to do it and to show people, like, I had no idea what chicken curry fabric was, like, 2 years ago. But this is what it is. This is how you find the good material and everything like that. So that's what we've tried to do a little bit more of, and that's what we're going to be doing a lot more of into 2020 as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. So yeah, I guess kind of switching tacks a little bit, maybe an interesting thing is like, so something that people often think about when they're starting a company is how they're going to like pay the rent, basically, right? How are they going to continue to be able to fund their business and actually make it something that can turn into a day-to-day activity for them and not just a side project? And I know that you mentioned, you know, thinking about how you saw a lot of interest and making that first sale was a huge factor in that. Have you thought about, I guess, like other types of funding? Like, have you ever considered venture funding or angel funding or any of that? And
yeah, we've definitely considered it. We haven't felt like it's the right moment as yet. We have applied for grants and such. So we got an NC Idea grant last year. NC Idea has been wonderful. Shout out to them. But in addition to that, I've taken on part-time work here and there and like consulting gigs or whatever it might be, because to me, you know, if you're raising money, you spend a lot of time raising money. And I think that's all really good, right? Because you're having to articulate your value proposition and everything. It's additive to the business, in my opinion. But for us, if I don't feel like we're there quite as yet, or we don't want to raise money quite as yet, to me, like, working part-time, right? Like, that's time I'd probably be spending out talking to venture capitalists. And so as long as what I'm doing is additive for us in some way, to me, that's like a good way for us to raise money. So one thing I do on the side is I work with PRX, the Public Radio Exchange. They are behind really great podcasts, actually. And I help them run design thinking workshops for journalists looking to get into podcasts, or public radio people looking to get into podcasts. And so to me, that's additive, because design thinking is something that has been at the core of the business, but that I lose sight of a lot of the time, right? Once you're in the weeds. And so every time I do something like that, I remember, like, okay, how can we, you know, implement this idea as an MVP instead of me spending months on it? You know, how can we be more iterative? And so things like that have been how we've funded the business and simultaneously also, I think, added to it. But in addition to that, I have a lot of friends and family who have been really great about letting me like sleep on couches when I've needed to, and or not couches, like nice bedrooms and everything. Like, so many people have been so supportive, and that's been such a big part of it as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I guess, I know this has definitely happened for me, and I know this is probably something that's happened to every entrepreneur, but there are definitely points where you feel that everything is completely, going to shit.
Yep.
You're like,
there's no better way to say it. That's it. Yeah.
Like, you just don't know if anything is going to go forward.
Yeah.
I guess, if you would be comfortable, like, is there one of those times you'd be sort of like able to describe and sort of what helped you get out of that and help you either get out of that mindset or sort of?
I mean, there are plenty of those moments, right? And I'll go into one more specifically, but I think like the big thing that helps me get through it, one is surrounding myself with the right people who help me understand that that's business, right? And a lot of those people have actually been my family members. My dad and his brothers and sisters have a company that sells uniforms to the military and law enforcement. So they're kind of in textiles, apparel, right? Like right down our alley. Totally. And so when we have production issues, when something isn't selling, when, like all these things are stacking up, they're the ones who say, we've been in business for so many years and this happens to us. Like, they have orders come in months late, right? And so that often helps me get back on track. And then it's also, I ask myself, am I still happier doing this overall than I would be doing something else? And if I'm not thinking like, oh, I would love to get this XYZ job, if my mind doesn't go over there, to me, like, I'm still in the right thing. If I still believe in what we're doing at the end of the day, I'm still in the right thing. And so, like, I've really needed to take on that mentality actually in just the past few months. We've been fulfilling this big order that you know about and that I'll be able to talk about more in January or February. But it's been a mess, and I'm not afraid to say that, because it's not a reflection to me of like the fact that we haven't like done something well, but it's been because we haven't done it before, right? And so yes, we could have done things a lot better, but you don't know until you do it. And people can even give you all the advice in the world, but you don't know until you do it. And we've had, again, major production issues that have led to delays that are all sorted out now. We've had shipments go awry, like FedEx lost our shipment.
What?
Yes, actually, like just 3 days ago, and we had to go to the facility and beg them to look through trailers. And this wonderful woman, her manager chewed me out. She was like, "You're not going to get it. Like, when we find it, we'll find it." But her wonderful like employee ended up digging through trailers and found our packages. But like at every single step, it's felt like something's gone wrong. Something has gone wrong, not it's felt like. And just the other day, I was like, is the universe telling me to just quit? That like this isn't going to work out? And I was like, am I doing the right thing? Why am I in this business? And it really was thinking about it in terms, like reframing it in my mind, right? Like, this is how business goes. It's not meant to be that if you're doing the right thing, everything's going to go smoothly. It's if you're doing the right thing, you'll figure it out.
Absolutely.
And again, that mentality has come from talking to a lot of people who've been supportive, and then just personally trying to think, well, okay, fine. Would something else make me happier? And no, like right now, something else wouldn't make me happier, even though it sucks on a lot of days. Like, it's just, you got to figure it out. And so I suppose if there are too many days where I feel like that and I'm like, I really don't want to be doing this anymore, then it might be time to think more. But to me, like otherwise things have still been temporary. Like that feeling has been temporary,
right.
and something brings me out of it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, how do you get through those things?
No, I think that's a totally relatable thing to say. I think the idea that, I mean, the point you bring up is very valid, right? The idea that if you're doing things right, then things will continue to go well is just not how things work at all, right? It's like, if you're doing things right, then you're figuring out what things you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
Like that's like the correct thing to do is just to find all the things that are going wrong as quickly as possible so that you can figure out how to course correct.
Yeah.
Right. I think that, at any given moment, there are probably 300 things that we would like to be working on and we would like to be fixing. And it's just about prioritizing those and figuring out, which ones are going to make the biggest impact sooner and which ones are going to make me feel more, I guess, like happy with the overall state of things. I think that idea actually that you bring up is super relatable in the sense that thinking about your overall state of mind and saying like, yes, today sucked and these things happened that were very annoying, but overall, would I rather be doing this or rather be, working at a big company or working on grad school or something like that? Like, no matter what, as long as you're sort of like overall, it's weird to describe because I think it doesn't seem tangible probably if you're listening to it, but at least to me, like it's a very like distinct feeling that I can understand and solidify, I guess.
Yeah. Exactly. And as long as you're not making the same mistakes over and over again, right, then you're learning. And to me, it's also, someone told me like play out the worst case scenario when you're feeling like that. And one of the worst case scenarios, right, is like Sani fails and I have to find something else and I've lost all of the money and time that's gone into it. And I've played that out before, and it's like, okay, right? I've learned a lot, so it wasn't a waste of time and a waste of money and a waste of anything. Like no matter what, it's not going to have been that.
Absolutely.
So I think also playing out the worst case scenario, even though you don't want to sit with that too long, is also a good way to snap out of it because it's like, it'll still be okay.
Totally.
But it's not an option. Failure's not an option.
So right now it's you and your sister, Ritika, is that right? I guess in general, how do you guys sort of delineate roles?
Yeah. That's been interesting because my sister's in school, and so there are periods when she has more time versus less time. But for the most part, we do design together and we do a lot of the strategy work together. And then in terms of executing and operating, that's me because I'm the one, doing it really pretty much full time.
Right.
She is a really good thought partner in every sense. Like she's, she started off as a high schooler doing this, and a lot of people were like, why would you start a business with a high schooler? But it's because she's really smart and we complement each other in the right ways. And so I'd say now we are getting better at properly delineating things, especially because she's now studying fashion also. So I think more and more design will be in her realm, but still like I'm the one who's able to go to India, not necessarily her all the time. And so we still kind of have to figure that out. But we also have some really great interns who have worked with us, and that's been a big help as well, because I think, a lot of things come up that you have to be reactive towards. Like you can't necessarily be proactive about everything. And so they've been great about helping us with that. But for the most part, that's how me and my sister have kind of, figured out who does what.
That makes sense. And this is your first business, right?
Yeah.
So I guess you don't have something to compare it to, but there are a lot of businesses, I guess, where people meet their co-founders or their coworkers in school or at a previous place of employment or things like that.
Yeah.
You've known your coworker your whole life. So I guess what is that like to work with a family member?
It's really good in a way because no matter how bad of an argument we have, like we got to sit next to each other at dinner or something like that. And our parents are like, you better figure this out because you're not ruining this vacation or whatever it is. Like, and it can get really bad too, right? Because this is someone who knows you so intimately that like we know how to get under each other's skin.
Right.
But at the end of the day, again, I think it's been the best thing for both of us because we've gotten to know each other in kind of a whole new way. And again, I think our skills are so complementary in this really exciting way. And we have one more sister actually, who's like in the middle of both of us, and we try to get her involved here and there, but she's like, I'm not doing that. We're gonna have a lot more arguments. But I've not regretted for a minute like choosing a co-founder who's also my sister. I think it's just been a really good journey for both of us, and we have had to figure it out through like the lowest lows where we're like, forget you, like I'm gonna walk away and do this by myself. Like we've always like to me come to a better place even after those really low lows. And my dad works with his siblings, his 6 siblings, pretty much. So we've also had, I have to say, like a really good example of a family business and how it's very much give and take. Like there are periods when, you know, his other siblings have had to step up, when he's had to step up, and he's always been like, don't keep tabs on how much, you know, each person is doing and, you know, who made this mistake, who made that mistake. He was like, you're family. Yeah. So it's going to ebb and flow, but like at the end of the day, like that's what comes first. And to me, that's how they've made their business work over time, by putting that first. And some people would think if you're putting family first, do not ever work with them. But I actually really disagree with that if you have the right examples and the right relationship. So we've been lucky with that example, and I think we've also been lucky because when we get along, like I think we do really good work.
That's awesome. I agree.
Yeah, thanks.
And actually curious, so your last name is Shamdasani, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the name Sani Designs comes from?
Yeah.
How did you think about the name? And obviously, especially again in sort of like fashion and consumer products, the name can be fairly important. I know, at least when I'm giving people advice on B2B stuff, I tend to tell them don't spend too much time thinking about the name. Like it probably isn't going to matter that much, but I don't know, like how important do you think the name is, and like how did you sort of come to this one? Yeah,
it took a long time. We were thinking of iconic fashion brands like Carolina Herrera and Sabyasachi, and it's all people's names, or oftentimes it's people's names. And we were like, Niki Shamdasani, Ritika Shamdasani, and it didn't feel right to us. And if we chose one of our names, it wouldn't represent both of us, right? So that was also a thing. And so my sister actually came up with like, what if we just call ourselves Sani? And I hated it at first, actually, because I was just, I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, right, like, if you pick something and you stick with it, probably, like, maybe you'll grow to like it, and that's what we did, actually. I was just like, fine, I mean, let's go with this for now, and it's not like anyone will think about it too much if we change names, but it really stuck, and it also, like, means gift, and so that was, like, a cool thing we discovered, and it's also, someone else pointed out, it's also close to, like, Sani, even though we don't really sell saris for the most part, but it, like, there were all these, like, connections being made kind of by other people, too, when they heard it. It's simple to say, simple to spell, and so we kind of kept getting these inputs where it was like, this is a good name, and now it's grown on definitely me. She liked it from the beginning, so but that is exactly where it came from, our last name.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And right now, so you guys sell in person, and that's at some pop-ups that you guys are doing, right? And you sell online.
Yes.
I guess, like, what are your different channels of sales? Like, if somebody's trying to get a Sani piece, how do they get one?
Yeah, so online, yes, www.sanidesigns.com, or you can shop through Instagram. We're Sani on Instagram, Sani. We also do in-person things, so we'll take private appointments. We'll go to people's homes if that's what they prefer, but then we also go to shows, or we do shows, and we'll actually have a fashion show coming up March or April, don't know as yet, but that's also a big thing for us, and we'll be doing that in partnership actually with the pediatric oncology department at UNC Hospital. And so when we do these fashion shows, we like to make sure we're doing something kind of with the community, but that's a really good way for people to see the clothes on people, and then also get the chance to, you know, feel it, try it on, and see what they like. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. The last thing I wanted to do is something of a rapid fire round.
Okay.
This is a pretty common trend with podcasts, so I'm just going to try to see how this goes.
Okay.
I have a few different topics here and would like to hear just your spit take on them.
Okay.
So, and or I guess specifically your take on how it affects you.
Okay.
All right. Ready?
I guess so.
Amazon.
How quickly consumers want things and the convenience of getting them. Is that the kind of like rapid, like how?
Actually, maybe like how it affects your business, if at all.
Yeah. It affects Sani in terms of how quickly consumers like want to be able to get something, and how convenient that experience should be.
In a frustrating way?
Not necessarily. I think in a way that just like pushes us to be better. I mean, we're not going to be that fast, right? Because this is a different kind of product,
of course,
and everything.
Yeah.
But I think it pushes us in a positive way. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. Fast fashion.
Fast fashion pushes us to think more about responsible business practices, what some people call sustainability, right. But that's a very ambiguous term, and how we can make sure we're highlighting the ways that we're trying to be a more responsible business.
Saris.
I think in the non-South Asian community, a lot of people think of South Asian fashion as saris. And we've tried to break that, and I think a lot of the fashion industry from there has tried to break that as well. But in general, I still think it is one of the most elegant pieces that you can wear within South Asian fashion. We just want to show there's more to it than just saris, and we can't personally drape them, so we try to find easier ways to get the sari look.
Nice. Commerce over Instagram.
Commerce over Instagram, what do you mean?
Like purchases through Instagram.
Oh, I see. Commerce over Instagram has made us think more about how we can help customers vet our brand before they make the purchase. I don't think we've done a fantastic job of it, but like pictures, like close-ups of the fabric and things like that. It's made us think more deliberately about the commerce experience.
Influencers.
I have a love-hate relationship with influencers, honestly. I think that it... I don't know. It's not that I want to be like...
Maybe actually, honestly, clarify what your relationship is with influencers. Like, you guys use influencers, right?
Sure. We've worked with influencers through Sani. I think that there needs to be more accountability on both sides in terms of what people want out of the relationship. I think at this point it's become very... I think in some ways it's become a lot of like free product and stuff like that, and I'm not sure that either party is getting enough out of it. So I have a love-hate relationship with influencers.
That makes sense. Models.
We've worked with some awesome models. We have been very like community oriented so far. Models were our friends from the area who have been fantastic and have helped us out a lot. And so I think that's been really cool that we've gotten to work with a lot of our friends and meet new friends through the models that we've used for Sani.
Are any of those models also influencers? Is that ever like an overlap, or tend to be pretty separate?
There's sometimes an overlap, but I'd say for the most part, like the models we're using for photo shoots and fashion shows and stuff like that, they don't tend to be influencers in the traditional sense. But when we have sent our clothes to influencers, we also of course post them on Instagram as well. But for our photo shoots and stuff, it tends to be others.
Gotcha. And then last one is running a business internationally.
I really need to learn Hindi to do a better job with Sani, but it's hard. It is, I had to go to India at the very last minute, aka on a Wednesday. I realized I had to go to India because some very important pieces were not being made correctly. And on Thursday, I was on a flight to India. And that's expensive, it's difficult, and I was there by myself, and it's not always safe. So
it's tiring.
It's tiring, yes, that too. So it's really hard, and you have to understand how to operate within that culture. Even though it is my culture, right? It's a different place.
Right.
So it's been really hard, but it's forced me to grow a lot in terms of like how I think about the way I'm coming across and how I think about like business relationships and the different ways people respond to things.
Totally. That makes sense. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. This has been an amazing conversation as always, and I really enjoyed hearing all this stuff. I mean, I feel like we've known each other for what, probably 6 months, 7 months, something like that. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, something. Like, yeah.
Feels like it could have been years, honestly.
Definitely not long.
But we talk maybe 2 times a month, something like that.
Exactly.
I feel like there's so much that I learned in this conversation that I didn't even know, and it's been amazing to hear about your story.
Well, thank you. I always like our conversations. I learn a lot from them too. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, and last thing, if anybody wants to check you out, what should they do?
Yeah, they should go to www.sani designs.com, or they can find us at SANI on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, any suggestions, or if you or someone else you know would like to be on the next episode. And if you're thinking about starting a business, what are you waiting for? Do it already.